Good morning. So last night we got back to Joth, the Joth campaign, session number 65. Um, oh, I forgot the title of it already. Our necks on the line or something like that. I think that's what it's called. 2 hours as usual. Todd is very good at um, keeping these windows, from start to stop at about an hour and 57, 2 hour, 2 hours and three, whatever. It's really fantastic. So Todd is really good at that. And of course, it's easier to do when you know you're going to pick up and play, right? So you can just cliffhanger or something and know, hey, we don't have to get it all done tonight. I'll see you in 2 weeks. So it's a wonderful thing because you have a window, you play, and then you come back and do it again. So you're not feeling like you got to get it all done or like you'll never finish it because you won't play again or something like that. So great. This is session 65. If I haven't mentioned it already, we're using old school essentials. Um, um, I will say, well, I'll talk about this at the end. So the the crew had finished, had delivered the barrel to the original client in session 64. There we met the real patron, who then charged us to deliver the barrel to what's called the Dead House in Lowside, which is kind of the lower, the bad side of town, so to speak, which is where my character, the thief, is from. Actually, I think it's the bad side of town. I assume it is, but it's called Lowside. Something's physically lower and referred to as low side. I'm assuming is the low side of town, right? Okay. Anyway, long story short, we agreed to do it before sunup, but we successfully negotiate double pay, which he gladly agrees to do. And he also tells us where we can get treatment for our current conditions because we're all, well, not all of us, but some of us were beat up a little bit. And he gives us a digit. He gives us a bone, a finger bone that has runed etching on runes etched on it, and says this is how you get into the night doctor. So we travel over there with the barrel. Again, Nook pushing the barrel along in the streets. We get there safely without a problem. The bone gets us in. We meet this 7 foot creature at the door, who's wearing like a plague mask. It's not a plague mask. Well, I mean, you can see in the video if you watch the AP, you can see a better image of this character. But he has like a plague mask, but it's almost like he's. It's not like it's a something he's wearing. It's like it's who he is or what he is. But again, it could just be the art itself. I don't know if that's legit, but I would assume when Todd shows us the art, that's literally what it is. It whispers to some short little creature that comes over and snatches the bone from us, and he acknowledges the bone and gives admits us. And so we follow this little creature back into this is a tower, but we're on the first floor, back to basically a treatment room or area. And the real night doctor comes out, and again, he is garbed with a plague mask, and we proceed to negotiate with him to treat Nook, Brayer, and Melnoth, and successfully treats Melnoth. Um, and unfortunately, Nook ends up paying about 40 gold to get some help, but it was not a fair shake for the quality of care he got. And Brayer, we left there in their care because Justin was not in session, so we just deposited his character safely at the infirmary there, and who knows what it's going to cost Brayer. But hey man, it's your hospital. You're in the hospital. It's your bill, man. That's how it works here in America. Now, maybe up there in Canada they'll take care of you, but here you got to pay your bills, man. So I don't know if Joth's on the national healthcare system or if it's on the free market capitalist system here in America. If so, Brayer is going to be working for them for a long time. I think he may have to file for bankruptcy. All right, shame on me. All right. bottom line is, of course, I think Canadians might say, yeah, but Brer would have to wait in line for a month to get care. I don't know. All right, that's enough of that. All right. Point is, we deposit Brer there in their hospital, basically. And we decide to get this bear. We only have like 2 hours left before the sun comes up. And so we make our way to low side, which obviously gives me pangs as I recall childhood memories of growing up here, right? And of course, it's my neighborhood, so I know it and I have contacts here. But let's face it, um, once you get out and see the world, you're not going to really want to go back there, right? So I'm assuming my character's comfortable, but yet uncomfortable with this. So we make our way to what's called the Dead House, and this is an area of town, as I described, uh, as Todd is kind of speculating. Why wouldn't your character have known about this? And I just said because I stayed on the west side of Low Side. I wouldn't go to the east side of Low Side. The east side of Low Side for me as an orphan kid was like no way. I've heard horror stories of the east side, and that's how I explained how I would have never known anything about the Dead House. And so we get to the Dead House, and we are given by uh, Malachor, our patron, the passphrase. And so we rap on the door at this little door, and the peephole opens up, and the guy asks, yeah. So we give him the passphrase, and he immediately, again, gives us admittance. We make our way through a small alleyway, just large enough for a wagon into a courtyard, and in that courtyard, it reeks of death. And then we spy a large wagon piled full of bodies in all different levels of decomposition. Decomposition. So of course it reeks. It's gross. And this wagon is attached to it are large chains on each side of it. There are no beasts of burden attached to it on this side of it. This gentleman brings us over. He wraps in the left hand chain, and that chain pulled taut, and that chain begins to move, and it pulls this wagon of dead bodies kind of open, and we enter into a tavern. So this is like the door on this dead house building, which happens to open up. We enter with a barrow and all of us, and it closes behind us, and it's a tavern. There's people here drinking. There's a bar. And suddenly we realize, okay, this is it's like a speakeasy in a way. It's hidden. All right. I don't know what else goes on here. None of us do, but we're pretty unnerved by the reeking bodies, heaped upon the wagon. I think we all feel pretty disgusted by it. Um, Only Nook describes his countenance about it, right? Adele describes how he's clearly shaken, and he's clearly, not happy about this. Um, I'm fairly comfortable because I'm a thief and I've been in these kind of places before. But yes, the pile of dead bodies upon the wagon and the stench would unnerve anyone. We come in, we greet the bartender, and we tell him we're here to deliver something from Malachor. And he goes back and he fetches Nostril, right? Who we're supposed to deliver this to, but I didn't recall his name, but I did know Malachor sent us here, so I had forgotten the name of the guy we were delivering it to. Personally, I had Jason. Other people in the group may have known who we were delivering it to, but I was speaking. And he fetches this guy wearing a scarf around his head, and he comes up and he speaks to us, and it sounds as if his face is crushed in, right? He pulls the scarf away, and we can see his nose is gone. It's been removed from his face for some reason, whether it's disease or it's been cut off or whatever. And so he talks. You can barely understand him. He talks through the front of his face, basically, right? I imagine the whistle probably every time he opened his mouth to speak, it would sound nasally, but I imagine it was probably some whistle that would come through the top of his head where he had no right. So that was my imaginings, right? Todd did not simulate that, but he did a brilliant job simulating this guy's uh, speech, which we at times had trouble understanding him. Um, so we said, we've got your barrel, and he said, well, bring it over here, put it on the bar, and I'll take a look at it. So we bring it over, put it on the bar. He scrapes off some smut and muck from it, as it's covered in some grotesque stuff, And he says, yeah, he confirms it's the barrel. I said, yeah, now we want to be paid right now. Like we'd like to get out of here. You know, we've had a long night. Its sun's going to be up soon. We want out of here. And he starts to rummage to go get his purse. Meanwhile, Malinoff, David's character, has taken a seat because he's still recovering from injuries. He's not, he's kind of separated himself from sits in the seat, and he gets this whiff of strong tobacco odor, like almost like pipe tobacco odor, and it's not unpleasant. I would imagine in this place, and he's lucky. He gets to smell that instead of dead, rotting bodies. So he notices the smoke under the door, and it kind of comes up and then it kind of pulls back, right? And so, but Melanoff doesn't say anything to us. He just smells this, sees this. And as Nostril is coming back with his purse, um, there's a knock at that door, and which is funny to all of us because uh, the guy that brought us in secured the inside gate with a key, so no one should have been able to follow us through that gate and into this area and into this. Um, so there's this knock at the door. The guy who let us in approaches the door, and the door, as he approaches the door to open it, it gets blown off its hinges, just like a bomb goes off, and he's thrown across the tavern. Everybody scatters. We turn. I draw my weapon, and this tobacco smoke creature, kind of tumbles in and then forms itself, and then manifests itself in a physical form of a 3.5 foot cloaked female halfling who demands the barrel. And so I turn and said, well, listen, it's not ours to give up. It now belongs to Nostril. And Nostril, the little bastard, says, no, I haven't paid him. It's theirs. And Nostril and his bartender evacuate into the back room. So Nostril sells us out. And it's true in a way. We have not completed the contract. We didn't get our money. So in a way, it is our barrel. But of course, I had hoped Nostril would decide whether to give this to her or not. So I turned to her, and I'm kind of at this point kind of the face of the group because I'm kind of standing there negotiating, and I tell her, "Well, then you need to pay us 200 gold. We're not going to give it up. Listen, we earned this. We busted our hump." And so she smiles and tries to pass me, and I won't let her pass. I'm like, "No, listen, lady, you're not getting the barrel until somebody coughs up the dough." Meanwhile, both Moth and Nook stand on each side of the barrel at the bar with their weapons trained on it, and I basically not unsubtly do I threaten her, and they realize that we're not kind of getting anywhere with her. She doesn't seem to care, and they threaten the actual barrel itself, hoping that would give her pause. Right? It doesn't. She again attempts to pass me, and I cut her off, and they hammer the barrel from both sides, the lock, trying to shatter the lock of the barrel. And unfortunately it's warded or something, and they both take damage, and Nook loses grip on his weapon. It's flung across the tavern. It's flung to the floor, I should say. And she stops it, as I've tried to cut her off, looks up at me and exposes her fangs, and I know then immediately, oh, we're dealing with a vampire. And well, roll initiative, right? Occurs. Melanoff at that point uh, gets up and he begins to fumble around for the silver spike that he had acquired when they battled those. In session 63, they acquired the barrel. They had to go to a place and acquire the barrel. And after they did so, they were attacked. They were attacked by this mob of people that they ultimately defeated, but they were carrying silver spikes and garlic and other stuff like that. So they did keep a couple of these spikes. And it turns out Melanoth very quickly, right? And she's exposed her vampire ways. I mean, she manifests herself wholly into a form. She's now exposed her fangs. So we know what we're dealing with, right? And so Melanoff makes this assessment quickly. He's up into the melee as a magic user or as some type of spellcaster with his silver spike. I'm trying to fight it with just a sword. And Nook is now shocked and kind of stumbling around after taking a zap from this, as is Moth. So a melee engages, kind of calamitous. I realize as Moth swings through it, completely through it, without harming it with his halberd, I realized at that point, oh my God, I can't harm it with my weapons. So I attempt to tackle her and pick her up, and I'm headed for the door because we know sun's coming up any minute. And so I was going hoping to usher her outside into the courtyard where, when the sun comes up, we got the advantage. But I miss her, and she wounds me. Melinoff wounds her with a stake. Moth actually quickly in the second, third round, he decides to cut a leg off of one of these tables as a wooden stake, and he's able to get into the fray with this wooden stake as he's stabbing at her. And Nook is trying to attack her with his axe at first. Then Nook uses the barrel to try to run her over and basically scoop her up with a barrel and race her outside. So you can imagine this crazy melee as my character's trying to grab her. Nook's tries to run her, and hit her with a barrel and kind of knock her into the barrel. And Malinoth has wounded her, and so she turns her rage on Malinoth and jumps up onto the wheelbarrow to get eye to eye with him as she bites him in the neck, and she successfully bites Malinoth in the neck. He takes a pretty vicious wound. Anyway, Nook, to his surprise and shocked, can't believe she's jumped into the barrel. And so he's racing the barrel toward the door. And as we get closer to the door, the outside wagon of the dead has shut, which blocks that hole, right? Or to some degree, I think it somehow the door was blocked by this. And so he hits it with a wheelbarrow and tries to fling her out of it. She's too agile, so she's able to make a dex save and avoid being spilled over and buried under this wheelbarrow. And again, she's back into the fray, attacking basically Melanoff, and he's making random rolls as to who she's going to attack. So he doesn't pick a target. Todd's not picking a target here. He makes a random roll to see, and then he makes a random roll, or he makes a roll. I don't know if this is random in the book or whether he's using a monster sheet. It doesn't matter because it's fantastic. I don't know. I don't care how he designs his creatures or where he gets his creatures, but he would make a roll to see if she would use her claws or her bite. And so he would randomly roll, and for some reason she was still fixated on Malinoff. And fortunately, um, uh, again, at this point, I realize it's a war of attrition. She's powerful. She's getting three attacks. If she gets two or she gets one bite attack, which means you're going to potentially be turned. And so I'm in again as Troy, both as Troy and as player. And I've said this before. The OD 20 for me is in character as player, and I have no problem with that. Uh, this is part of the joy of playing D20. It is more social. It's just more relaxed. It's comfortable. It's fun. So I don't mind being in character, but also as a player. So I'm also very aware, and Troy would be too, that Troy's taken some damage. He's not stupid. He can do the math. This is a tough fight, and it's a war of attrition. At this rate, we're going to lose to this little monster. Fortunately, David strikes gold and rolls a 20, which is a kill shot, a silver stake right to her heart, and she evaporates into ashes. And we're all ultimately standing there, sweating and bloodied. And so David, who's been bitten on the neck and uh, it suffered severe damage, fortunately kills her. And so we're standing there. And meanwhile, Todd was making us every round make a roll to see if the sun would finally appear. And so he'd roll every round to see if the crack of sun would come through that open door from the outside. And it just not until we killed her did the sun finally, present itself. So it's like, oh, we were so close to ushering her outside into the sun. So anyway, and we turn to Nostril, and we say to Nostril, ultimately, now pay up, would you please? And so he pays up his 200 gold, and curtain falls on session 65. Our Necks on the Line, I believe, is the title. Again, another fantastic game. Uh, I've done this. I repeat myself a lot in these videos, I know, because but not everybody sees every video I make, so I like to give people some idea. Uh, I've been doing this D&D in particular, very much this way my entire life as a GM, and I have been blessed to get this experience through Todd, um, as well as Eloy in the last year, but through Todd for the last few years. And I'm constantly reminded of why this is why I fell in love with it as a kid. This is why I still love this kind of gaming. And I would never, I could do this, definitely. Because there is a joy here. There is a happy medium between game and role play and social, being with friends, right? This is all so important to me. The older I get, the more you don't want to take for granted. You want to be grateful to have these friendships, and you want to be grateful to engage in this thing as adult people and still have that joy, that whimsy. But that's not to say that there's not experiences you also want to have, like in character as character play, which again, Dell and I are trying to get through Dark Age of Man or maybe Space Age of Man, etc. But this is ideally for me. It's a sweet spot. It's a comfortable sweet spot, and I love it. I will say this, and I've talked about this before. Moldve, Old School Essentials, White Box, they all use those procedures. The procedures that I have made a video about, uh, 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 magic missile melee move or magic missile move melee, right? And when you roll initiative, declaration, etc. Okay. And I've made a video discussing that, as that's part of it. If you want to have the rules as written intended experience, and you want to play these types of OSRs, I recommend you do it that way and find out what is tactical, what is not tactical, why it's necessary, why it's not necessary. So we actually have, but I'll get to another point here. So last night we had a perfect example of why it matters if you want to do it. As if you do it in order, Melanoth had cast a spell. The vampire made the save. I forgot to mention in the fight, but he had cast a spell of trying to convince her the sun was raining down on her, was exposed on her. Well, she made her save, and it became irrelevant. But, but the point is, if we had declared action before, everybody's discussed what they're going to do, then you roll initiative, and then he would have made his random roll to see who she attacks because she won initiative and she attacked Melanoff and she succeeded. That would have that would have quashed his spell casting. He would not have been able to complete the spell. It would have ruined it would have messed up his round. So that's where I talk about the tactics. Why is it important to do this and do it in the proper order? Because we see the tactical part of the game. However, and everybody who knows me, I will tell you, I hate them, right? If they are in the game and we want to do honor to the game, then I'm okay with using them, right? But and they work. I mean, they achieve their goal. But the irony is when that's one of the reasons I ran to Basic Fantasy and ran 63 sessions in a year of Basic Fantasy online in my old channel, was because it removed these procedures, right? Not all procedures, but this kind of mechanism. So it allowed Basic Fantasy to be more free form, more role playing, less procedures. And combat was still the same, and there was still some level of procedures, but wasn't bogged down on whether you moved and then shot, or whether you shot then moved, or whether you passed your spell any time, and did you have to complete the round to cast. And so those who want simulation kind of tactical, then you want to follow those procedures, and voila, you're going to get that experience, which is fantastic. So last night, right, it would have cost Melanoff his spell, which is far more dangerous, and it would have been, it would have proved out why you have them, right? So for me, I played Moldve for 20 years, and I hand waved procedures. So badly did I hand wave those procedures as a kid running for my friends for 20 years. Did I forget that you're supposed to even roll the range that you're in? And I remember a couple of years ago, Eloy and I in Facebook got into not an argument, but he basically made some comment that you have to roll to find range. I mean, what are you talking about? That's not in Bell. And so I had to go back to Moldvay and look it up and went, oh my God, I had so bastardized Moldvay as a kid doing home brews that I never rolled distance, right? Because you're supposed to, when there's an encounter, you roll surprise, you check distance, and then everybody declares, and then we roll initiative, and then we go into the procedures. It's so simple now, but because I had done it incorrectly my entire life, and I will say literally incorrectly, because I don't think as a kid I ever even acknowledged it. I think I literally, I never, I don't think I once really did Moldvay right, which tells me again my memory. You're trying to remember back to being 10 and 11 years old, 12 years old. But I know this. Yeah, I would have been sloppy and lazy. I was a 12-year-old kid and I just wanted to play. So I had basically been doing Moldvay incorrectly my entire life. But I later, of course, was like, oh, it's homebrewed, right? As you start to play as an adult and you start to read these books, like, oh, I'm going to homebrew that out. I don't like that. But as I became dedicated to gaming and I became dedicated to giving games their honest due, then it mattered to me. Hey, if I'm going to play Moldvay, I want these procedures. If I'm going to play OSC, I'd like to play it raw, right? That doesn't mean there aren't some homebrew tweaks that every GM brings to the table. And that's not to say that we couldn't change games. It's not to say that Todd could say, you know what, this strict stuff kind of takes some of the quick joy out of it, right? So last night I felt more comfortable with it being just theater of the mind play. The minute we were started thinking, oh yeah, right, we got to do movement, we got to, which was great. We were trying to adhere to the rules. Ironically, I was less engaged, right? Which is why I don't like them because it takes me out of the this it takes me out of the fracas, right? I mean, I love to think of combat in these games as violent, fast, and chaotic, right? This when you proceduralize things, they seem like everything's happening linearly, kind of boring. My turn, your turn, you go, roll. But if you remove those procedures, you do get a feel of what a barroom brawl is like, what a ruckus is like, how chaotic and how fast it must be happening, right? So we went 5 rounds in this combat. Um, what is around 10 seconds? So in 50 seconds, this was decided. I think that's right. I don't know. I don't have OSC in front of me if it times. So in combat, I think a round is what, 10 seconds? So if we're 5 rounds in, that's 50 seconds, right? That's pretty epic, right? Again, I love to use the word epic lately, but my point is, you get the sense. Barbarians and basilisks says everything happens in a second. So if it's 5 rounds, that's 5 seconds. That's how visceral barbarians and basilisks is. And people playing it will play it. They'll follow the procedures. And so as a GM, you kind of remind them that this is barbarians and basilisks. If you follow the what it's the hint it's giving you, every action is about a second long. That gives you a real idea of how visceral, dangerous, and fast, brutal. And that creates a visualization of how brutal combat is. In D&D, it's about 10 seconds per round, I think. So 5 rounds is 50 seconds. That's still fast. It's still brutal, but there's a lot more going on. I mean, he's picking up a wheelbarrow, which explains actions. You're grabbing up the wheelbarrow. You're running into him. I was chasing her around trying to get a hold of her and couldn't do it. Right. So it's not like we're all sitting in a five. We're not, which is why I don't like maps and minis because you're looking at this thing that never moves out of its space, and we're all moving around it in this 10-foot space. It maps and minis kind of can remove that sense that it's a whole bunch of stuff flying in, flying out, sword swinging, etc. Especially when you're swarming one creature, right? So this is why I like theater of the mind over tactical. And this is why I removed procedures and are why I fell in love with basic fantasy because basic fantasy removed the procedures for me. I didn't have to homebrew the procedures out. Chris Gonerman, in his brilliant work, did it for me. So when I say we're playing basic fantasy, I don't have to explain to everybody in the group, why am I taking procedures out? That's the rule book. The rule book's taking them out. And everybody's, oh, I get it. Cool. Combat's much simpler. And therefore, better for theater of the mind because we're not playing tactically. So we don't really need those procedures. Now, I've made it clear in a video how much I appreciate them. And I've made it clear that I wanted to play these games as close to rules as written as possible to have the experience that was intended by the books. Maybe not by the game designers, but the books, once the book is written, and it's found in a time capsule in 200 years, that's the only evidence of how that's meant to be played. They are a textbook. They are a technical manual. If you want to, if you like it or not, that's all rule books are. They're a technical manual on how to do this thing. We have the luxury of videos. We have the luxury of pundits out here telling you how to play and how to read the rules, etc. So we're in a different era where you can find out, you can read old stories where Gary was interviewed and Gary would talk about his procedure, which was not maybe what was in the books. Well, what's in your book, Gary, is not what you're doing. Right. The book's a thing for you to figure it out, but my advice is do it your own way, right? Gary'd be the first one to say, dude, make it your own, right? That's most designers like myself will tell you the rules are there so you can play it and enjoy it, but you're free to throw out what you don't like. You're free to add what makes it better for you, right? And I've talked about rules as written when I try a new game because I want to know what pirate board feels like. I want to know what the people intended. So I wanted rules as written. That's not to say that after the first two sessions, a GM can say now that you guys have kind of seen how pirate board works. I would like to remove this piece because it kind of get in the way. And most of the players at the table would probably go, yeah, I'm not a big fan of that either. Or they might argue, right? So my point is, we had this amazing melee last night, but we were kind of stumbling over the procedures because what is our natural instinct? In theater of the mind, what's your natural instinct? It is to, of course, I'm either going to move, swing a weapon, or cast a spell, or shoot a bow, or run my wheelbarrow into it. The only thing we need Todd to facilitate is that everybody gets their turn in turn, and we need Todd to facilitate what's it going to take to hit her with a wheelbarrow and achieve your goal? Oh, make a dex check and under, or she'll make a dex check and under to avoid your wheelbarrow, that kind of thing, right? So then that's where GM fiat comes. That's where Todd having to adjudicate something that's not in the procedures, right? So, which it is, it's a movement. Technically, it's going to be a melee attack. So he could have just made a successful melee attack with a wheelbarrow, or he can declare that action. We assume that he can't miss her. She's in a melee scrum with us, and he's going to come barreling into her with this wheelbarrow. And Todd has her make a dex save to avoid it. So both of those are fair, and they both work beautifully. And this is the joy of D20. We can be flexible as GMs with this stuff. But I thought it was amazing how our want when it's also evidence that we're engaged. It's evidence that we are immersed in the scene. It's evident that David is in the scene. It's evident that I'm in the scene. It's clearly evident that Dell is in character, grabbing up the wheelbarrow and running at her with it, right? And so that I like that. When I GM, I want them in the space. I want them in the headspace, and they're wanting to engage this naturally as they visualize it. And so when we go, stop, let's go through the procedures. And I understand why we do that because it's meant to be tactical and it works and it's fine. And I don't care how we do it. It was just fun last night to kind of run into it. It's like we ran into the brick wall of, oh, right, procedures when we all so much just wanted to engage in the fiction and just fight this creature. And so that was a perfect example of why Dark Age of Man has zero procedures. It's why we purposely designed Dark Age of Man with no procedures. It's why I chose Basic Fantasy when I came back to YouTube in 2012, whatever it was, 2016, and started running Basic Fantasy and ran again, I think it was 63, 64 sessions in 52 weeks. And um, because Basic Fantasy stripped some of this stuff away, it was just an easier game to play with people. And so perfect for theater of the mind, in my opinion, right? Basic Fantasy. So they're all roughly the same. They're all D20. They're all going to create a certain environment of play. We all know that. The GM has fiat. The GM is the master, and we are players engaged in their world and in their fiction and their stories or whatever they are. However, a GM wants to set up his sessions, however a GM wants to give you that event, I don't argue with that. I understand that, right? So, but it was fascinating. It was like, okay, wow, now we're actually in this moment. I think we're all like, oh yeah, the procedures, let's do this right. But at the same time, you can just tell people like, dude, we know what we're doing. I want to make, we're in a scrum in a tavern. And I think Todd, everybody's like, wait, we know what we're doing. We just want to get into this. But then you're like, oh yeah, but it would have mattered for David to cast that spell successfully. So then what happens when we hand wave away the procedures? then we take that risk for David away. David now knows he can just cast it no matter what, and right, unless the creature goes first and hits him, and then he would just lose that round. But then David would just say, "Well, I'm not going to cast now. I'm going to stab it." Right? If I can't cast, I'll stab it. Right? So that's the problem with not having procedures. Right? She wins initiative. She hits him and says, "Oh man, you lost your because you're not going to declare beforehand." So David wouldn't even bother. He would just stab it, which is where the magic user becomes castrated, and because he didn't have to declare it. And if he's hit, David might be thinking, well, I can't cast if I've been struck, so I'm going to go ahead and stab it with my little dagger. So what happens? There's this kind of internal thing that a player might do too. David might have then just reset, so I can't cast now, so I'm just going to use my dagger, even though Todd didn't tell him he couldn't. So when you don't have procedures, players will also make that assumption that, and they, in a way, can hurt themselves. And the procedures, at least everybody at the table knows that was fair. David sucks, man, but we did it right, and right. However, basic fantasy, that's not an issue, at least not in my recollection. I haven't read basic fantasy or played basic fantasy in years, but I don't think spellcasting there was a problem with interruption, right? Because there were no procedures as there was just surprise and initiative, and then you can move, missile, melee, magic, right, in any order, right? Which is kind of how D&D fifth edition. I think it's in any order, right? D&D you can move, take two actions, right? But you can take two actions and move. I think spellcasting might have some special rules to it, let's say fifth edition, but again, I haven't read or played fifth edition in years. But you get my point. This is why I like games like Sword and Wizardry Continual Light for Theater of the Mind. There are no procedures. It's super simple. We roll initiative, we roll to hit, we roll to cap, we roll to save, that kind of thing. Um, Basic fantasy is simpler, right? In that sense, especially for Theater of the Mind online play. But it was just fascinating to be in the minute and go, oh yeah, right. This is why I love not having procedures, right? But then when you reflect back in the middle of the combat, go, oh, but if we had done those procedures right, David would have been screwed on that spell cast. Right. That's why procedures are cool. Right. So you're torn. It's like, that's cool. But boy, when you want to just be in character and in the space and you want to just engage this massive ruckus, however you kind of imagine it, then procedures can be a pain in the ass, right? Which is what I talk about all the time. How do I find that sweet spot? How do I get in character, be in character? And procedures not wreck that for me, which is why we wrote and invented Dark Age of Man and our style of gaming. It's why I GM Basic Fantasy a particular way. It's why I when I came and I talked about Basic Fantasy and why I liked Basic Fantasy so much, and I wish those videos were still available for people. I made it clear I homebrewed out. I would never play D&D Basic Moldvay correctly. I homebrewed out procedures. And why I used Basic Fantasy was I didn't have to homebrew it out. Chris Gonerman and I, in that sense, were simpatico. So it's like, I'm going to use this guy's rule book because I don't want to have to homebrew everything. So this is the rules. This is what we're going to do. And I don't have to then spend time explaining to people my homebrew tweaks. And so you try to find the game that helps you facilitate the kind of experience you want as a GM or as a player, I suppose. People would choose a basic fantasy table over a hardcore Moldvay table because those players don't want procedures or whatever, right? Whatever. Or they would choose Sword and Wizardry Continual Light because they want to level up based on the number of sessions they survive, not based on collecting treasure, right? So Sword and Wizardry Continual Light says, listen, you survive a session, you survive two sessions in a row, you level up. You survive four sessions in a row, you level up to level two. You survive eight sessions, you level up to level three. We're not killing, and we don't need to acquire treasure or experience by killing creatures to level up. You need to survive. So continual light is super simple, super effective for theater of the mind. And also the players aren't concerned about treasure and killing all the time. The game becomes more of a storytelling. It becomes better for freeform theater of the mind kind of games that just don't involve these gamey pieces, right? So that's why I tell people there's a reason there's 1,000 OSRs because every GM has their own homebrew rules that they think are great or are great, and then they publish them. And thank the God they do, right? Because they're not everybody wants to write their own homebrew rules, but they're going to search for the perfect fantasy OSR that fits what they're trying to do. When I came back and ran Basic Fantasy, I would have people pop in and say, dude, this ain't D&D. Dude, you're not running D&D. No, I'm running basic fantasy, you dumbass. Right? Just because it's D20 fantasy doesn't mean that I'm running D&D. Right? And so I would have a handful of people pipe up and say, yeah, dude, you ain't running this ain't Dungeons and Dragons. You ain't running D&D. You ain't. No, I'm running basic fantasy. Right? And because basic fantasy removes those procedures, it's not Moldvay, right? It's not that D20. So the stuff matters, right? I wouldn't run white hack and expect somebody to say, dude, you're running old D20. No, I'm running white hack, dude. And white hack's different. You know what I mean? But the point is, people would perceive the OSR flag as just Moldvay over and over and over. No, Labyrinth Lord is close to that, right? Sword and Wizardry is close to that. OSE, Old School Essentials, is literally a remaster of Moldvay, which I still believe is the best D&D books ever done. Cook and Moldvay. So, but again, there's that list of combat procedures, which if you're playing the rules and you're using them, they're going to have an experience, right? Slightly unlike last night, right? Our combat experience was less Moldvay and it was more freeform, theater of the mind. We all got in it. But then when we kind of right in the middle went, oh yeah, right, procedures, then it became Moldvay for better or worse, right? And I would say they were both fine. It's just how do you want to play and does it matter? And I think, yeah, when it comes to tactics, for movement, missile casting, for definitely for David as a spellcaster, it would have been hugely important. For me, wielding a sword in a tight space, just trying to fight this thing and pick it up and grab it or whatever, nah, the procedures were completely irrelevant, right? So then it becomes, is every melee require those procedures? We're in a tight space. We're all surrounding this little girl in a tavern, this little halfling in a tavern. Probably the procedures aren't such a big deal, right? Except what goes first. Missile goes before melee, right? That kind of thing. But anyway, fascinating. It's another brilliant session. Again, Todd is just fantastic, entertaining. I won't do voices. I rarely do voices. I will affect a character, but I won't do voices. And I got to give him credit, man. He doesn't care. He does these voices. They're fantastic. They certainly engage you in the space. They engage you in that conversation. Todd is brilliant. And the thing about voices is they can crack people up. And he did his nasal nostril guy, and I can't help but thank God I wasn't on screen because I had to fight back laughs. I mean, it was fantastic. Entertaining as hell. He wasn't trying to be funny. He was just doing the character. But my point is, you can't help when people do voices, you can't help sometimes but to be tickled, right? And that particular character was so good. And that particular character had, a malformed had had his nose removed by, I'm assuming, from, either a disease or from a bad bet or something. And so you couldn't help but crack up, especially when you couldn't understand it, right? It was pretty fun. It was fun. And it's good. This thing about Todd, Todd has a great mix of kind of horror with a little humor. It's really, really good stuff. And uh, I tend to be very intense and gravitas in my games. I tend to be just intense. So if I'm trying to theme in you dark horror, I'm not gonna give you many laughs. Todd's great at just balancing. We're certainly we're completely grossed out by the bodies piled on the cart in various stages of decomposition and the stench. But then we meet Nostril, and it's like this great balance. It's fantastic. Todd's just a master. He's a master. All right. Thanks, guys. And thank you, Todd. Thanks, everybody. Wonderful sessions. Bye bye.